that benefits adult learners like you. One way to demonstrate your appreciation is to make a tax-deductible donation in any amount with the knowledge that your contribution helps keep this program vital and available for all. All donations made by December 31st will be matched dollar for dollar by the High Holiday Days campaign matching donors. So you can use the link that Rabbi Kate will place in the chat session to make a donation, or you can send a check or call Temple to Her Sinai. Now, thank you so much. And Susan Matalon, our EO chair, will take it from here.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to introduce first Rubissa Hassan. Rubissa was raised in Jacksonville, Florida. She has bachelor degrees in Jewish studies and theater production, as well as a master's degree in social work from Yeshiva University. Sharona was an early childhood Jewish studies teacher in Liebler Yenev College during her time in Melbourne. She shares her curriculum of Jewish studies with weekly updates to her blog, kosherkids.blogspot.com. She is a qualified Kala instructor and a skilled educator who enjoys teaching bat mitzvah girls and adults Torah on a weekly basis. The Rubissa is the Sephardic Becker Holem Youth Director and coordinates educational programming for their youth from preschool to high school. She teaches Judaic studies in the preschool of Seattle Hebrew Academy. Rabbi Ben Hassan grew up in Manchester, England. He's done extensive study in Israel, where he met his wife. Rabbi Hassan was a rabbinic fellow and teacher, as well as community director during his 4 years at Yeshivat HaMatar. You'll have to excuse my pronunciation. In September 2009, Rabbi Hassan moved to Melbourne, Australia, to become a high school teacher at Liebler Yenev College, a modern Orthodox religious Zionist co-educational day school. In August 2013, Rabbi Hassan moved with his family to become the scholar in residence of Sephardic Becker Holem congregation. In February 2014, he accepted the position of rabbi of the synagogue. Rabbi Hassan and his wife, Rubissa Sharona, have 4 daughters, Kohava, Gabriela, Ruti, and Tova. Welcome to Endless Opportunities. Kate.
Hey, thank you for that introduction.
Oh, you're welcome.
It is definitely our pleasure to be here. And as was pointed out before it started, the interesting way to start it all, to be having Hanukkah in this way on Zoom. But it's really exciting to get to connect with each and every one of you just before Hanukkah begins. So I'm thrilled that we can be here in this way right now together. And as we look at Hanukkah 2020, we've got to dial it way back to get to the first Hanukkah, because each year that passes, another layer gets built on to how we celebrate things. And I assure you that at the first Hanukkah, there was no ugly Hanukkah sweater contest. So there's, to me, that we have to get down to the kernel of what we are celebrating. And don't get me wrong, I love the matching Hanukkah pajamas. We've got them. But I really want us to start in the place of where it begins, and then we can add those layers on. So we have to step back to the year 165.
BCE.
BCE.
Going back a long time.
Before there were ugly sweaters at all, I would guess.
Yeah, I don't think we had sweaters, yeah.
At a time when the temple was still standing, at a time that is so different from today. But the big struggle that happens at the first Hanukkah isn't so different from today. And that is the introduction of Hellenism and the Assyrian Greeks coming over, and a shift in philosophy around personal identity. So that is something that is extremely relevant today. But if we look at it then, before 165 even, there was the leadership of Alexander the Great. And things were pretty great under Alexander the Great, and the Jewish community valued the Hellenism and this introduction of Greek ideals, and it was valued. I mean, you probably all know somebody named Alexander who's Jewish and proud of this Jewish name. And it started in that time to celebrate our relationship with Alexander the Great. But things quickly took a turn when
after Alexander passed away untimely, the Greek Empire got split up. And what's right in the middle of that Greek Empire was the land of Israel. And there, things changed a little bit. Instead of promoting Greek culture, Greek philosophy, Greek everything, things changed because they said, not only are we promoting Greek culture, but we're going to start banning Jewish laws. We're going to stop you from keeping Shabbat. We're going to ban circumcision. We're going to ban your holidays. And again, something which is very relevant to us now. When things are taken away from us by force, that's when we start to miss them. That's when we start to get upset about them. At the beginning, we were very much enjoying Greek culture, becoming very Greek, going to the gymnasium, going to the university. We were doing all of those things. But then everything changed. Suddenly, Judaism was being put on trial, and we were not allowed to practice our faith. The Torah was banned. We couldn't learn Torah. We couldn't circumcise our children. We couldn't celebrate Shabbat. We couldn't celebrate our holidays. And that's when there was an uprising. That's when there was a fight where the Greeks tried to double down. They tried to make our temple Greek. They put in their idols there and they defiled it. And we fought back.
And that choice to fight back was crucial because, you know, it's fine to welcome in other things and to say like, oh, I mean, right? How many of you went to university and how many of you have gone to the gym, right? That's a part of the Greek culture that we embrace more than 2,000 years later and happily. But the point is, when someone starts to take something away, is it okay? You know, okay, so you're going to take away, they take away Rosh Chodesh. All right, well, that's only once a month, so that's okay. I can get rid of that. That's fine. But at what point of losing your, well, in this case, your Jewish identity and your relationship with the divine, at what point do you say, no, wait, that's too much. That I can't give up. I could give up this, but not this. At what point do you stand up and say, no, this is who I am, and this is what I need, and this is what I believe in, so it has to stop here. And that is the point, because it went on for a while, like, oh, okay, that's fine. Oh, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, Rosh Chodesh is the monthly celebration of the new month. So that's okay. I can give up something that only happens once a month. But as it gets closer and closer to like, wait, this is the point where I say, no, this part of my identity, this part of my Jewishness is too important. It stops here. And that's the point where there's a shift, where the Maccabees step in.
And the Maccabees come in, and it's a fight between Jewish Greeks, Greek Jews, and Jews who are fighting for the very core essence of Judaism, of the Torah. And it's also a battle against the Greeks themselves. And
it's a civil war that we don't talk about very often in terms of a civil war.
Yeah, it's very easy when we're teaching this to our children, our grandchildren, to think this was a battle of Jews versus Hellenist Greeks. But the truth is, this was a civil war between Jew and Jew, between the assimilated cultural Greek Jews and the Torah Jews. And they were fighting for what is our future? what is going to be. And this is something which has been going on for thousands of years as we try to establish what is essential to us as Jews that we cannot live without. And there are many things which we are open to, as these are things which we choose to do. These are things which we like to do. But when things are taken away from us by force, it changes the very nature of who we are. I'm just reading the chat as we're going along here. Bill's keeping me on my toes. I love that.
Do you want to?
No, I'll answer in a second.
Okay. And that is a parallel that I want to get back to at the end. There's a lot more I want to explore in the original time, but as we peel back the layers and look at the relevance today, that's the crucial piece that we have to ask ourselves, or one of the many crucial pieces of Hanukkah, is at what point does assimilation take us too far? And part of the 2020 eyes of that is we've reached this point, certainly within America, where whatever my identity is, it's going to be embraced. Like, right? People are so proud to share what pronouns they want to identify by, right? This is who I am, and this is how I want you to acknowledge me. Because if I dilute that, if I dilute myself and what I believe in, then I'm losing me. And if we dilute our Jewish selves and we say, oh, it's not so important, what are we losing in that? And so it's not a civil war today. It's a personal battle for each person of at what point does my Jewishness mean so much to me that I need to express it, and where do I, that's okay. That's not crucial to me.
I want to touch on Bill's comment here about, can I share where it is in the Mishnah and in our texts. So it's very interesting, because if you had to ask a Jew, what is the hierarchy of the holidays? So people will mention Passover, obviously, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but somehow Hanukkah has this heightened level of, maybe for some Jews, is even higher than those. And yet, and this is the reality, Hanukkah is a low-level holiday. It's its proximity to Christmas and our American culture, which makes it the holiday that we all know and love. Which is the irony of it, which is we're fighting against assimilation. And yet the reason why so many of us love Hanukkah is because of us living in America, in this beautiful country that we live in. So we're going to touch about this a little bit more. So why I'm talking about that, Bill, is because if you look in the Talmud, there is no tractate Hanukkah. There are 1.5 pages of Talmud which deal with the laws and customs of Hanukkah. And that's it.
And to be clear, how many pages is the Talmud in its entirety, right? It's not like, the 20 pages, 1.5. No,
there are around 2,000 pages of Talmud. It takes 7.5 years if you were to read each page, one page per day. So you can figure out the math, exactly how many pages there are. But to give you a comparison, there are 120 pages on the laws of Passover. There are 150 or so pages on the laws of Shabbat. There are 100 pages on the laws of an Eruv. That's the wire which allows strictly observant Jews to carry in a public domain. It's a very tough one there. So comparing those, there's 1.5 pages on the laws of Hanukkah. Now, if we go to the Talmud there, what does it say? What is the reason why we celebrate Hanukkah? Is because after the victory of the Jews over the Greeks, we entered the temple and there was only enough oil to light for one day, and miraculously, the oil lasted for 8 days. Okay, that's basically it. And the Gemara the Talmud goes into how high should the Chanukiah be, how low can it be, should you do it with oils, what time should you light it, what position should you light it, those types of questions, very technical details. But very little is really mentioned about the war. Whereas if you go to our prayer books, and you go to where we do grace after meals, Birkat Hamazon, we do a prayer called Al Hanisim. And there, the emphasis is not on the oil, but on the military victory. The fact that God took the few, took the pure, took those who were dedicated in his service, and they prevailed over the mighty, over the strong, over the many. And that's what we're celebrating, is the miraculousness of the victory. So what is it? Is it the oil? Is it the military victory? And the way that I express it is as follows. Without the miracle of the oil, I would never have realized that there was a military victory was also a miracle. I would have thought, why did we win? Because we were the best guerrilla soldiers ever. We had the best tactics, we were on the best course, and we just knew how to fight in the land of Israel, and that's why we won. But by having the miracle of the oil, that small cruse of oil that lasted all those 8 days, it completely changes what my nature and what my understanding is. So now I know, not only was God with me with the oil in the temple, but God was also with us, fighting against the Greeks. And therefore, Hanukkah is transformed to realizing it's not about just acknowledging the open miracles, such as God taking us out of the land of Egypt or giving us the Torah at Mount Sinai. It's also about realizing the small miracles, the miracles which we see each and every day, the sunrises, the sunsets, the health that we have, and how much more do we realize that now when our healths are in question, where we are all having to work so hard to look after ourselves. But we realize God is with each and every one of us. And when we pray and we give thanksgiving on Hanukkah and we praise God by singing Hallel, the praises of Psalms, what are we acknowledging is God is always with us, not just in ancient times, but in every day.
Absolutely. And balancing that military victory and the miracle of that with the miracle of oil. I find it fascinating to look at the success of a ragtag army in the land of Israel. And we look at through the lenses of the 6-Day War or any of Israel's military history in modernity and in anyone's life here. And if there had been a cruse of oil that had been found, then we would have another version of Hanukkah. Instead, it's just, oh yeah, we won that and we have Israel. And so it needed to be balanced with a miracle that went beyond the laws of nature, because we can build ourselves up and say, oh yeah, that military victory, that was ours. We did that. But when something goes beyond the laws of nature, then we're like, oh, that's where the divine is. And it's upon us to be able to acknowledge that the godliness and the divine in all the things at all of the time. Otherwise, we can lose sight of it.
I think that's an interesting point that you mentioned, comparing it to the modern state of Israel. Maimonides, when he codifies the laws of Hanukkah, says one of the main reasons why we celebrate Hanukkah is because following Hanukkah, there was Jewish sovereignty for another 200 years. And the question you can ask on Maimonides is, what are you talking about? That wasn't a great period of time. In fact, those kings were some of the worst kings of Israel, and it wasn't a very good time period. Why are we celebrating that? And the Maimonides is making a point. Jewish sovereignty is something to be celebrated. So the fact that we have the state of Israel, the fact that we have independence, the fact that we have, again, post-COVID, we'll be able to go visit again whenever we like, is something to celebrate. So Hanukkah is also about celebrating the state of Israel, about celebrating all that we have, all the independence that we have, all that we've become as a nation. I want to carry on. Bill's asking another question about some of the differences between Sephardic and Ashkenazic practices on Hanukkah. The main one you'll find is how many Chanukias, how many menorahs you have in your home. Bring it forward.
That's no working for me.
No, there we go. It
Zoom likes you
works
more.
for me. There we go. This Chanukiah, in our home, you will only have one Chanukiah. Whereas in most Ashkenazic homes, you will have the number of Chanukiot per the number of family members. In fact, some people even go further and have dozens, hundreds of Chanukiot. What is the basis of this? Now, if I told you that the Sephardic practice is based on an Ashkenazic custom, and the Sephardic practice is an Ashkenazic custom, would you believe me? This is the only place in all of Jewish law where we Sephardics learn out from Tosfot, who are Ashkenazic rabbis who lived 1,000 years ago. They say, if you have more than one Chanukiah, how will I really know what night of Hanukkah it is? So they say you can only have one. Because if you have 5 Chanukiahs, each with one, I might think it's night number 5 instead of night number 1. Whereas Maimonides, the Rambam, says, if there's 5 people in your home, you have 5 Chanukiot, because we want to show that every one of us is excited about Hanukkah. And the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, in his law code, he makes the law like Tosfot for the Sfaradim. Whereas the Ramah of Moshe Isserles codifies the Ashkenazic law like the Rambam, like Maimonides, the Sephardic practice. So somehow there was a flip-flop. And the commentator, the Torei Zahav, known as the Taz, says this is the only place in Jewish law where Ashkenazim have a Sephardic practice and Sephardim have an Ashkenazic practice. Only place. But if you ask us, how do we do it? So in our home, we have one Chanukiah, and on the first night, I light it. Second night, my wife lights it. Third night, my oldest daughter. Fourth night, my second oldest daughter, and so on and so forth, and we switch it around. Often I get to light in synagogue, so because I've made the blessings in synagogue, I'm happy that I've already done it. So I've lit it at home, and we're definitely an all-girls home. So in my home, all the girls are lighting each and every night, and that's how we do it. Another custom, which is different, is, and then this is traditional, and obviously it's changed as we've lived in America. If you go back 100 years and you were to go to Turkey and find out how do Sephardic Jews celebrate Hanukkah, they wouldn't be giving each other Hanukkah gelt or Demei Hanukkah. There'd be no money, there'd be no gifts, there'd be no presents. That holiday would be on Purim, the holiday where we celebrate Queen Esther and Mordecai. That is the holiday around gift giving and money. Whereas Hanukkah was not. Hanukkah was about oil, and it's about oily foods. And we would have something called bumuelos or sphinge, where we take dough and we'd fry it up, similar to donuts, but different. And we'd have them with honey or syrup, and it's very, very light and sweet. And that's how we Sephardim celebrate it. But obviously, living 100 years in America, the Sephardic congregation here, Sephardic Bikur Cholim, and our sister congregation, Ezra B'Sereth, we've had Sephardic Jews here for about 100, 110, 120 years. So now the customs are changing. So guess what? We're going to be opening up the presents too. Because again, like the Rubissa said at the beginning, who can turn down those ugly sweaters and those matching pajamas? We all love them.
And the
so
latkes. Who can turn down the latkes? Who doesn't want fried potatoes, right? It's the best.
I'm on a low diet, so I'm turning it all down as much as possible. But yes, I must say that we do have latkes occasionally.
So if I pick up at Susan's question about the different spellings of the name of Hanukkah, that is part of just transliteration. When you have a Hebrew word and you write it into English, there is no hard, fast, one right way to do it. And I enjoy within the Ladino community that we're a part of, and certainly all the Spanish-speaking community, not with Hanukkah per se, but with holidays in general and with spelling of words, that they have different sounds somewhat that represent the same thing. So you'll see like J's in words that I wouldn't have thought they would be in their transliteration. But so other than the transliteration, meaning that can change out the spelling, I want to look at what the name Hanukkah means.
Yeah, so Hanukkah, if you look at it, the last two letters, Kaf and Hey, is the Hebrew date. It's telling you that it begins on the 25th day of the month. What is the word Chanu? Chanu means dedication. In this case, it's a rededication, not only of the Holy Temple, which was rededicated as it was purified and cleansed from the Greek period where they put idols in there, and where a lot of the people who were the Kohanim, the priests who were running the services, were not on the highest level, where they rededicated themselves to becoming more devoted to God. But also Hanukkah is a rededication of ourselves to Judaism. Hanukkah is also from the word chinuch, which means education. We're re-educating ourselves. We are rededicating ourselves to our Jewish traditions. And I said, that's the irony of Hanukkah, which is now a very secular, assimilated holiday. We can't get away from the fact that if we really want to understand Hanukkah, it's rededicating ourselves to our Jewish traditions. Janice is asking a question about what happens if a couple gets married and both bring a menorah into the marriage. So that's a great question. So the Talmud talks about this, and it says the best way of doing the Chanukiah, the basic mitzvah is ner ish ubeito, a man and his household. But we all know that beito, what is a household is not a household. Beito means a man and his wife, a husband and wife. So the tradition is that the husband and wife lights one Chanukiah together. So even in Ashkenazic homes, the tradition was one Chanukiah for husband and wife, and then the children would light Chanukiahs. The idea being one Chanukiah for husband and wife because they share and radiate the light together rather than they need their individual lights. So but just as a way talking about Sephardic customs, I do know many Sephardics who also light multiple Chanukiot, again, because of the prevalence of the Ashkenazic tradition of lighting multiple Chanukias. But again, I would recommend, if one knows their tradition, that Sephardim should light one, and if they want to light others, to light them in other parts of the room, because there they can hold by that tradition of having one, so you know exactly how many what night of Hanukkah you're on. Okay, that's how that works differently. Esther, my good friend Esther, Captain Sharon, how are you, Esther? It mentions that Sephardim light the candles differently, and that's true. We light with primarily with olive oil. That's the best way to light. If you can't light with olive oil, then you can use wax candles, but olive oil is the best. But we set up with two shamashim. The shamash is the candle which you use to light the Hanukkah candles. But we have, so for Sephardim, two shamashim. We have the shamash which stays in its place and where the new one is going to be placed. And we have the shamash candle and the shamash oil. The shamash candle lights the other candles, and there's the shamash which stays in the middle. So we have the two shamashim, whereas Ashkenazim have one shamash for that. And I think the reason why Sephardim have two is because we light with olive oil. And as you know, if you're having an olive oil cup, it's very hard to light other olive oil cups, and it would be a problem. And that's why Sephardim have two, whereas Ashkenazim, olive oil was one of these rarest of things to get oil. They couldn't get olive oil, and that's why they have wax candles. And that's where that tradition came from. Now, wax candles are very pretty, and you get different colors and everything else, but as long as I've known, we always do olive oil because we want to recreate what was done in the temple. I can see more questions in the chat here. Do you think that the Sephardim, a minority within a minority, adopted Ashkenazic practice to assimilate into the majority and be accepted? Absolutely. This is what's known as a miut of a miut. When you are a minority of a minority, and you're struggling to keep your Jewish identity at hold, and whole while being part of greater American society? Absolutely. So again, I don't criticize. When I see people on Facebook and they are lighting lots and lots of menorahs in their home and they got a big Sephardic name as their last name, I put a big like on there and I say Hanukkah Alegre, Hanukkah Sameach, or even a Freilichen Hanukkah. I wish everyone a happy Hanukkah, because Hanukkah is one of those where it's so easy to celebrate. All you've got to do is take some candles, or better still, some olive oil, and light them and make a few blessings. It's as easy as that, and show thanksgiving. So yes, I want people to light it the Sephardic way, don't get me wrong. But if they're doing it in one way or another,
They're doing it.
they're doing it. And they're showing their Judaism loud and proud, and that works for me. Does this apply to Shabbat candles also? Sephardic only lighting one pair and Ashkenazic numerous pairs? That's a great question. And yes, to my knowledge, Sephardic practice is 2 candles, one for Shamor to guard the Shabbat, and one for Zachor, one to remember Shabbat, one applying to the positive commandments of the things that we do on Shabbat to remember it, such as making Kiddush, or at the beginning and doing Havdalah at the end. And also the Shamor, the guarding, which is the guarding ourselves from the negatives of don't do this, don't do that, making sure that we're keeping all the laws of Shabbat. So the Sephardic approach is 2. Some have the custom of lighting multiple candles for the number of children in their home. But to my knowledge, that is an Ashkenazic custom, not a Sephardic custom. And my wife, coming from an Ashkenazic family, brought that into our home, and we happily light 6 Shabbat candles, 2 for Shamor and Zachor, which are the Shabbat Sephardic candles, and then 4 for our beautiful 4 daughters.
And it is also a prevalent within the Sephardic community, and I don't think I've seen an Ashkenazic community much of lighting oil for Shabbat. And certainly within SBH, we have a special place where the wicks float in oil to light Shabbat candles, and that's what I see in many Sephardic homes. So that the candles don't need to be candles. They can definitely be like the oil. Be
wicks. And we do that also for memorials. And someone has a yort site, what we would call a meldado, we also light with oil. If that's not available, or it's easy to go to the supermarket and get that 24-hour, 48-hour yahrzeit candle, then sometimes that works. But the traditional Sephardic approach is oil with a wick, and you have enough oil for that wick to burn for 24 hours.
But the differences were made largely, I think, for if you look at the social history, or it's what was available in the countries of Ashkenazic versus Sephardic Jewry, and the readily available olives that could be made into olive oil very simply and enjoyed and celebrated, versus in Eastern Europe, where potatoes were just about all you could get. That's how latkes began.
I was going to say, a lot of the traditions in the Sephardic tradition are much richer because of our location. Being in the southern Mediterranean, that climate, that diet, the whole range of fruits and vegetables available to us made the ranges of food that much richer. Whereas, take for example, the holiday called Tu B'Shvat, where we celebrate the New Year for trees, Sfaradim, for hundreds of years, have celebrated frutikas because we had those fruits available. Ashkenazim have only really embraced Tu B'Shvat in the last 100 years, where those dried fruits have been available to them. And again, they had dried fruits because that's what they had, as opposed to the fresh fruits. And yes, I think, why would Ashkenazim fry latkes, but fry potatoes? Because that's what they had. They didn't have much other things than that, so that's what that became. And so a lot of Ashkenazic foods are really meat or potatoes, or in the of Shavuot, is a holiday where all the dairy is available. So there's a lot of dairy which goes there. Whereas this actually, if you wanted to do something Sephardic, the two things which we do are lots of oil, but also lots of dairy, lots of cheese, lots of milk, because of the story brought down that one of the Greek generals, one of their practices was something called this is the Latin name, but obviously had a Greek name, was called prima nocte, which means first night, where they forced the Jewish women on the first night of their marriage to their husbands to sleep with the Greek officer. And this is how they did it. And this has happened throughout history, not just to the Jews, but the Romans did this, the English lords did this to the Scottish and to the Welsh. It's all over history, this concept. And the story goes, again, this is more apocryphal than a 100% happened, but there was a woman called Yehudit, and she gave dairy to the Greek officer. He fell asleep and she killed him. She cut his head off. And we celebrate by having dairy foods, because the dairy or oiliness of the foods that she gave him made him fall asleep. Now, why do I say this is apocryphal? Because many people think this story is actually based on a story back in the book of Judges, with a story which is written in our Bible, where a young woman called Yael, she had the Sisera came in, the Canaanite general, came into her tent looking for refuge, and she gave him some dairy food and some oily food, and he fell asleep, and she took a tent peg and she killed him. So some say that this whole story about Yehudit and Hanukkah is really an older story from the story of the Judges, which is in our Bible. But either way, what's it telling you? It's another lesson where women are not on the side or on the periphery. Women are front and center. Even in Sephardic tradition and Orthodox tradition, not only can women light, but women can light for men. It's normally they're in Orthodox or Sephardic tradition, the men take precedence. Here is the one of the few situations where not can a woman light, but a woman should light, and a woman can fulfill the obligation of a man. Now, I know that's for conservative and reform, that isn't a big newsflash, but in a Sephardic traditional world where men are central, and certainly in Orthodox circles, this is a codified halacha that not may, but must or should, and therefore I have no problem or no hesitation. In fact, I encourage my wife and my daughters to light the Hanukkah candles, and they can have me in mind and they can fulfill my obligation. Why? Because they are part of the tradition. Not only that, the Shulchan Aruch says that while the candles are burning, women, specifically women, not men, women are not allowed to do any work, specifically chores around the house. Now you're thinking, come on, Rabbi, we're in the 21st century. Who cares what it says in the Shulchan Aruch 500 years ago, 600 years ago? No, this is a point that before we became assimilated, before we said that we're going to have egalitarian services, before we're going to have equal rights for men and women, the Shulchan Aruch said it 500 years ago. Women do not work while the candles are burning. Why? Because they were part of the miracle and they need to celebrate it as much as the men do. It can't be another holiday where the women are working and the men are enjoying the fruits of their labor. This is a holiday where we celebrate men and women together, because we were all on the verge of assimilation. We were all on the verge of being attacked, and yet we were able to come together and fight and bring back our Judaism, not only 2,200 years ago, but so that it should last us for not only our lives, but for our children and our grandchildren.
Beautiful. I'm just going to get back into the Q&A. So Faye asked if we use special olive oil, and certainly the whole Hanukkah story that is the special oil. It couldn't just be, oh, well, make some more oil and light the menorah in the Holy Temple. It was a very specific Shemen Zayit Zach, the first drops of oil that come out is all that could be used, and it was purified, et cetera, et cetera. But in lighting in our own home, when we were first married, we bought all the wicks and we bought all the oil and we bought the purest oil you could get. And it didn't go very well. And there was a lot of squabbling of the wick is too long. No, the wick is too short. No, why did it fall over?
It's so hard. It was tough for many, until they came up with these beautiful, I should have had it, these beautiful olive oil cups. And sometimes you can get them in they're frozen gels, and sometimes it's pure olive oil. This ones we got this time are pure olive oil cups. It takes away all the angustias, as we say in Ladino, all the stress goes away, because all you need to do is take off the lid, take the candle, light it, and it burns for 2.5, 3 hours in a beautiful light, and it's very, very relaxing. I set them up normally the morning before. So I came home this morning from prayers, and first thing I did, take out the oil, get it all set up, and make sure that everything looks good, and it takes away all the issues.
They say that one of the purposes of Shabbat candles is Shalom Bayit, to have peace in the home. And so for us, the oil kits for Hanukkah also bring peace in the home.
If it's all set up correctly. Another question you have here is, are there any Ladino prayers that we use? So it's interesting. One of the more famous songs on Hanukkah is a song called Ocho Candelicas, the 8 candles. And actually we're going to be singing that tonight with the program we're doing with Beth Shalom. But that song, Ocho Candelicas,
was written in my lifetime. I was surprised.
It was written in 1984, but it's become a popular classic. So don't tell anyone. They weren't singing Ocho Candelicas in Turkey in the 1890s. They'd never heard of it before. But we sing Ocho Candelicas. We sing a lot of the songs, but a lot of the Hanukkah songs that we sing are more modern songs, which we have. But
and the modern Hebrew songs, a lot of them were written around establishment of the state and a little after that, because it, as I had mentioned earlier, it carries so many of these major themes of a military victory. So one of my favorites of Banu Choshech Legaresh, we are taking the light and we are burning out the darkness and we're illuminating a situation. So it's not Ladino or Yiddish, it's really a celebration of the modern Israel experience, which then brings me to that question about, in Israel, Hanukkah, are latkes and sufganiyot found all around? Definitely they're found all around, but I will say that the donuts are more prevalent in
much more prevalent. Sufganiyot, 100%. They're all over the place. Latkes is
they're called levivot.
They're called levivot, and they're a very they come in second place for sure. There. Bill's asking a question, which is, could the beheading story be related to the story of Judith and Holofernes? Yeah, so that's what I was hinting at, Bill. And that one is, there's a question of the historicity of that, of the Book of Yehudit in general, whether the Book of Judith is a conglomerate of other stories put in there, and is the story of Judith cutting off Holofernes' head, whether that was really just a real retelling of Yael and Sisera from 1,000 years before it. Can we sing Ocho Candelicas? Let me find it if I can bring it up on my screen, and I'm going to try and bring it up.
Does that mean I just sing along?
We have a version of Adina, what's her name? Mendez singing it.
Oh, yes, from Frozen. There is a version of her singing it.
But then we take away your time. So what if I just put a link into the chat?
I think put a link in, because neither Shona or I are the best singers.
Right, and yeah, Adina Mendez definitely wins. There's nothing better than Frozen singing Candelicas.
Yeah, That's true, Sharon. Flori Jagoda was the one who performed it. Yeah.
But it is amazing how popular it's become. I mean, it's kind of like I have a little dreidel as far as like popularity and like, oh, I know a song for Hanukkah.
I mean, there is Mal Tzor, but that one is a few hundred years old. But it certainly wasn't written 2,000 years ago or 2,200 years ago. So we'd like to open it up. We've got about 10 minutes left. Any more questions? Feel free to put in the chat or unmute yourselves. We'd love to hear from all of you and wish you a Hanukkah Allegre, a happy Hanukkah, Hanukkah Sameach, and even in the Yiddish, a Freilichen Hanukkah.
Thank you so much. We are going to have an opportunity. We've been invited as an EO community by the Seattle Jewish Seniors to join them for a Hanukkah concert on Sunday afternoon at 3. So if I don't have a link to that in time for me to send you my follow-up email, I'll give you Susan Matalon's contact info so that you can ask her how to hop on Zoom for that concert. And then I'm not sure if folks are able to, I know that folks aren't able to unmute themselves. So if you have some way of alerting me to the fact that you have a question, it's wonderful to hear your voices while we still have the Hassans with us.
So Faye's asking, do we make our own sufganiyot? So I want to tell you something, Faye. During COVID, my wife, the Rubissa, and my oldest daughter, Kochava, have become the greatest Sephardic chefs ever. We've lived in Seattle 7 years, and for 7 years, we've been, okay, my family comes from Gibraltar and from Morocco. It's not the same as Turkey. Sharona's family is very proudly Ashkenazic. So we didn't have all the Sephardic Seattle traditions, but during COVID, we have become Seattle Sephardites. And we have every 2 weeks, we have Sephardic baking and
on Zoom
through our synagogue, and our sister congregation Ezra B'Sereth does it on the off weeks. And we've been doing burekas, bulemas, pescado con huevo limon, con tomate. We've done boikus, and now my daughter is going to be leading. She's going to be making bizcochos for her middle school friends. We're going to be making these types of donuts called buñuelos.
And tonight we're doing them with Beth Shalom congregation.
With Beth Shalom, and Esther Kaplan, who's on this call, her niece, Nicole Sharon, is going to be leading us with those. But we have become lovers of Sephardic foods, not just eating it, but also making it. And but the one which I like the most is, I think it's the most healthy. It's cuajado, which is basically a spinach quiche.
I think pescado con tomate is the healthiest.
Okay, pescado con tomate is also one that I like. But I want you to all imagine, those who don't know me so well, I was about 70 pounds heavier about 2 years ago. And now I'm one of these health freaks who runs 3 times a week. And it's got to, I'm not saying I'm not going to have a donut or a latke over the holiday, but instead of having 3 or 4 every night, I might have 1 or 2 over the week. So when my wife can, or my daughter makes something which is Sephardic and healthy, or at least not covered in oil, then I'm overwhelmed and overjoyed.
He just bought us an air fryer, maybe for Hanukkah, maybe just in general. So it's a big question of, can you make latkes and buñuelos or sufganiot or whatever else in the air fryer? So we're planning on testing that out.
You know what? We had sweet potato fries in the air fryer. I couldn't tell the difference. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't know. I mean, once you know, then you can say, oh, you know what you really know is the difference? You don't have that oil stomachache afterwards. And I'm telling you, air fry is the way to go.
But then you're taking the olive oil out and the whole miracle of the oil. Come on.
Oh, you're right. It's true.
This is
More
wonderful.
questions, guys.
Yeah,
I want to see more questions.
we're also getting more invitations. So one of the things that COVID has done by putting us all online is we're able to connect with more of the community here. So we have an invitation from the Seattle Jewish Chorale. I know that Beth Shalom would be delighted if we're coming to their adult learning and other celebrations that are streamed. So if you need any help getting those connections, I hope that you will not hesitate to reach out to me. Anything that's sent my way in time to pass along in the follow-up email to this program, I'm happy to include.
And maybe Rabbi Kate, we can share with you some of our Sephardic baking, because I know we've got some Sephardic bakers on this call, and I'm sure we'd love to share some of those links. As I said, every week or so, either at Ezra B'Seret or SBH, we've got Sephardic baking going on Zoom. And it's like this, it's, everyone, there's a spotlight video where we have a local chef making something and we talk about the rich Sephardic traditions.
It's chefs, but they're home chefs. And that's part of what makes it really exciting, because I've gone to plenty of other baking chefs where it's like a famous chef and you're like, oh, I cannot do that because you're like this famous chef with your Michelin star restaurant or whatever. But these are like friends and so like, yeah, your kitchen's like my kitchen. I can cook like you cook. And to me, that really made it a much more approachable cooking experience.
Yeah. And Marlene's put a good point there. Your prakis are also very healthy. Your praks are great. So your prakis
did one on that, right?
That was Marlene, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I missed that one. I was going to say I had a conflict that week and I haven't watched it yet to make them. So I'll have to watch the YouTube now. Thanks, Marlene.
All right. So how else can we help you as we're finishing up? Is everyone excited for Hanukkah? Now that we've told you not to get your matching ugly sweaters and pajamas, I want you to know, because my kids aren't going to see this till later, we have got some, and not only that, we've got some ugly socks as well.
Fantastic. All right.
And to me, part of it is, if you go back to the original Hanukkah experience, yes, I can make fun of the ugly socks and the ugly sweaters. But if it is the assimilation piece and to say my Judaism isn't a priority anymore and I'm happy to embrace this Hellenistic lifestyle, well, so wearing the ugly sweater is standing up and saying, I am proudly Jewish. It is a part of Pirsume Hanisa. It is part of celebrating and publicizing the miracle and the pride in my Jewish identity. And it is a crucial piece of the holiday. So I'm not going to say Hanukkah means lighting the Chanukiah, saying the prayers, and wearing an ugly Hanukkah sweater. But it is a piece of it of how do I proudly show my Jewishness? How do I share how proud I am of my relationship to my Jewish people, my Jewish history, and to God? And maybe it is through an ugly sweater.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the oxymoron of wearing a ugly sweater is basically saying, I am loud and proud. I love my Judaism. Here it is for everyone to see. And you know what? I actually love seeing them. And the more I see them, the more I know, you know what? There's a future for Judaism. We still have it, and we're going to be around for very, very many years to come. And that's the hope.
Oh, you have somebody showing it off, Al, down there. Can you stand up again, Al? And I'll spotlight you if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's spotlight you.
And then I think we did have one other question.
Oh, love
it.
Nice. Al Shamari, I love that.
All right, Bill, did you want to have the last question? And then folks.
I just want to say thank you to our wonderful, wonderful presentation. And I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for your great questions.
So now when we say goodbye to the Hassans, we're invited to stay here. We'll see how many folks stick around. We have this ability to go into breakout rooms to meet in smaller groups and really get to know one another. If you're signing off, Chag Urim Sameach, may it be a very happy first night of Hanukkah this evening.
Hanukkah Allegro, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so I've given everybody the chance to unmute. I'm going to stop the recording.